6 years ago, I was in India, and the list of ways that trip changed my life is endless. But there was one moment that I'll never forget that I just can't shake. It was a moment with a woman who had leprosy. We had been visiting and ministering to a group of people that still suffered from it, which I didn't even know still existed. And I can remember the look on her face when I touched her. See, lepers to this day are still shunned by society and no one comes near them. So the fact that an American would care about them, period, was monumental. But someone would touch them and not be afraid and pray for them and care about them. That changed everything. The truth is, I think a lot of us see ourselves as those lepers, and that God is kind of the society that shuns us. Even if we don't go to church, right? We might buy into the idea that God is all-powerful and he keeps all this going and he's loving and he cares, but personally, we struggle with that. Maybe we're too broken, we're too messed up, we're too dirty for God to actually want to get that close to us. And we struggle with that in this idea of a personal relationship with God. But there was this time when Jesus turned that whole misunderstanding on its head. It was during a funeral procession, actually. He was walking down the road and he had a huge crowd following him. And the whole community that he was heading into had come out for this funeral. That's how they did funerals. So when they met at the town gate, we're talking about a gigantic crowd. And you would think, you'd be tempted to think that Jesus probably cared about all of the eyeballs on him, all the people staring. But what you find out is he really cared about one, the widow who had lost her son. The Bible says that his heart was overflowing with compassion for her. Can you imagine that? God himself having the deepest compassion. Actually, the original language, it's from his guts. He had compassion for her. It was this raw emotion for her. We never think about God caring about us that way. And what happens next is just astounding. He's so moved that he walks up to the dead body of her son. And he says, "Get up." And he brings that boy back to life. And the boy begins to speak and everybody's jaw hits the floor. I mean, talk about a moment of shock and awe. And he hands her son back to her. And we can't miss what Jesus did. Jesus had just touched a dead body, which according to religious practice was wrong and would make him unclean. But what I sense in what Jesus did there was that no one's so broken. No one's so dirty, so off-putting that Jesus doesn't want to help them. This woman had lost everything. This boy was dead. And yet Jesus doesn't keep them at arm's length. He walks right into the situation, puts his hands on it, and breathes life into it. And you and I struggle with that, and yet it's reality that Jesus cares about you and me. That he has compassion for us when we're in our moments of despair and when we've lost something important to us. Jesus sits with us in that. And he has compassion for what we're going through. And he offers to breathe life into it. So here are my questions for you, two of them. First, who's the person in your life that needs to know that kind of compassion, that needs to have that kind of understanding where you could show them who Jesus is? Because Jesus not only cares about you, he cares about those outside of the church, those that are far from him. He has compassion for them as well. And lastly, what part of your life needs new life? What part of your life is broken and sick that Jesus might be offering you to breathe new life into? Because none of us are so broken that Jesus doesn't want to help us.